A dead man just opened his eyes. Not in a dream, not in a flashback, but in a hidden tent buried deep inside a silo that everyone believes has already claimed his body. The show told us he was strangled. The show told us he was burned to ash. And yet, there he is, breathing, waiting, very much alive. If Bernard survived, what else has this silo been lying about, and who else knew the truth was still down there in the dark? That single reveal at the end of episode 4 rewrites almost everything we thought we understood about Robert, about the safeguard protocol, and about how far people are willing to go to control the truth. But to understand why finding Bernard alive is so devastating, we need to walk through everything that led Juliette back into that tunnel. Because this episode is really about two desperate hunts happening at once, decades apart, both circling the same terrifying question: what is this world actually protecting, and from whom? Start with Daniel and Helen, because their storyline in the past timeline is where the paranoia really sets its hooks in. After the chilling audio recording from the plane crash rattles them both, they make a run for Steve's place, hoping to hear it again and confirm what they think they heard. Instead, they find an empty house, torn apart, with no sign of Steve or the tape. That's the moment the ground shifts under them. Helen, convinced their phones are compromised, smashes them without hesitation. She isn't being paranoid for the sake of drama. She genuinely believes that whoever silenced Steve is now watching them too, and she's not wrong to think so. She leads Daniel to an unexpected hideout, a lavish apartment she once decorated for an ex named Palmer. It's a strange, almost dreamlike detour, and there's a painting in that apartment Daniel can't stop staring at, a shrouded woman guiding a group of children through darkness. The show lingers on it just long enough to make you wonder if it means something beyond set dressing. Maybe it's nothing. Or maybe it's a quiet echo of a story about guidance, sacrifice, and children being led somewhere they can't fully understand. Which, if you think about it, is basically the entire premise of Silo. While they regroup, Helen drops a real bombshell. Using her stolen work laptop, she discovers that Steve's actual name is Stephen Price, and that both his number and James's number have gone dark, scrubbed as if they never existed. She also remembers Steve mentioning a contact in Moldova who supposedly holds a copy of that damning recording. But chasing a stranger overseas is a dead end without more information, so Daniel does something smarter. He remembers the chess game Steve was playing right before everything fell apart, and how oddly the pieces moved. Helen's mind jumps immediately to something real-world governments have actually done, using online games as cover for covert communication, the same trick Edward Snowden once exposed when agencies infiltrated multiplayer games hunting for hidden messages. If Steve wasn't playing chess at all, but talking to someone through the moves themselves, then his opponent might be the last thread connecting them to the truth. That thread gets cut, at least temporarily, the next morning. A tense meeting with Sam Ramsey at the Pentagon goes nowhere because Sam is terrified of being seen with them. Then Henry steps in, and this is where the show reveals just how effective institutional pressure can be without a single threat ever being spoken aloud. Steve has been quietly folded into a cybersecurity think tank. James has received a convenient loan to save his brother's business. And now Henry offers Daniel and Helen their own version of silence dressed up as reward, a job at the Times for her, real medical care for Charlotte in exchange for Daniel dropping the Iran investigation. It's not a bribe framed as a bribe, it's framed as kindness, which is exactly what makes it so unsettling. Helen, worn down and terrified for Charlotte's safety, takes the deal. Daniel doesn't. They part on bad terms, and for a moment it looks like the investigation dies right there. Except a week later, Sam calls Daniel with something new. Something significant enough to pull both of them back into a minivan and back onto the hunt. We don't get to hear what he found yet, but the show is clearly setting up a reason strong enough to override Helen's fear, and that alone tells you how big it must be. Now shift back to the present, where Camille has already made her choice. Rather than risk releasing vitamin D+ into the water supply, she decides Juliette has to die quietly, and she orders Amy to knock her unconscious before she can be formally executed. It's a chilling decision made to look procedural, but Amy has her own plan. Instead of following orders, she knocks out Emerson and helps Juliette slip away, finally admitting the truth behind her actions. She was the one quietly lowering Juliette's medication all along, hoping to nudge her back toward clarity, back toward remembering, back toward rebellion. That escape sets off a chain reaction across the silo. Paul and Molly visit the coroner and learn Orla wasn't killed by the rat-killing gas released during the search for Juliette. She was struck from behind with something like rebar and dumped in the mines to be found, or perhaps never found at all, if the gas hadn't forced a rescue mission that stumbled onto her body. That single detail turns Orla's death from tragic accident into deliberate murder, and it means someone in this silo, someone we've already met, is capable of premeditated violence. Meanwhile, Lucas, alive and hiding with Kennedy, Kat, and Sandy, finally tells the outsiders the truth he's been carrying. The world above is not the pristine paradise their propaganda promises. He explains that the footage fed into cleaners, helmets exist purely to keep them motivated, because if they saw the real desolation waiting outside, they'd have no reason to clean the cameras at all. It's a small, quiet detail, but it reframes the entire ritual of cleaning as psychological manipulation rather than duty. Kennedy refuses to believe it. Everyone else already does, which visibly shakes him more than the revelation itself. Back at the infirmary, Shirley tries to reach Juliette and is blocked by the raiders until Knox intervenes, staging a brawl that draws them away just long enough for her to slip through. What she overhears is chilling. Robert ordering a search for both Juliette and Amy, and Camille pressing him to move fast, warning that if Juliette sparks another uprising, the algorithm itself might trigger the safeguard protocol. That's the second time this season the show has dangled that phrase like a loaded gun sitting on the table, and you have to wonder how many more choices Camille and Robert can make before someone finally pulls the trigger. Juliette, meanwhile, is being moved through the silo's shadows. After a brief, tense standoff with Robert, one that ends in fear rather than violence, she reconnects with Shirley, who reveals she has no idea Lucas is even alive. That revelation alone reshapes their next move, because now finding Lucas becomes just as urgent as finding safety. With help from Ossie, they descend toward the long-sealed digger void, unaware that Sandy has already spotted them and alerted the others. Lucas immediately understands where Juliette is headed and rushes to catch up. There's a smaller, quieter thread running underneath all this urgency: Paul's continuing investigation into Orla and Carla, and the strange, almost eerie lack of concern anyone shows over Carla's disappearance. His conversations with Mike and later Glenda hint that the people closest to Orla, her father Ed included, may know more than they're letting on. It's easy to overlook next to the bigger reveal waiting in the tunnels, but Silo has never buried a detail like this without a reason, and that brings us back to the digger void. Back to that hidden tent Juliette and George once built for themselves, and back to Bernard, alive, hidden, and clearly being cared for rather than left to die. Robert told everyone he choked Bernard and cremated the body. That was a lie. Given that nothing in this story points toward cloning or resurrection, this has to be the real Bernard, kept alive in secret since the moment he and Juliette were trapped in that airlock fire. If Juliette walked away with fewer injuries while Bernard suffered severe burns, and the algorithm needed only one of them to stabilize the silo, it likely chose her, leaving Bernard to be quietly erased from the official record while staying very real underground. So why would Robert, once Bernard's clear adversary, now be protecting him? The most logical answer connects directly to something Bernard learned from Juliette in that airlock, a possible way to shut down the safeguard protocol. If Bernard passed that knowledge to Robert, it would explain everything. Why Robert has been nursing him back to health in secret, why he seems to be working alongside Amy to slowly restore Juliette's memory, and why he backed away from confronting her in Pump Room 76 instead of turning her in. Two people who used to represent opposite sides of this silo's power structure may now be quietly working toward the same goal, reuniting Juliette and Bernard so they can dismantle the very system that's been controlling everyone's lives. If that theory holds, the real fight in Silo isn't between Juliette and the silo's leadership anymore. It's between everyone who wants the truth to survive and an algorithm that would rather erase every person who gets too close to it. So here's the question worth sitting with. If Robert has been secretly protecting Bernard and helping Juliette all along, is he actually trying to save this silo, or is he simply trying to save himself before the truth catches up to him too? Let me know what you think Robert's real motive is down in the comments, because I don't think we've seen the last twist this season has planned. If this breakdown helped make sense of everything happening in Silo Season 3, do me a favor and hit that like button, subscribe if you're new here, and share it with someone who's just as obsessed with this show as we are.